And we're recording.
Hey everybody, it's me, Suge Avery.
And Mason.
And you know it's good when you hear Right Con Topany.
Woo!
This is not Right Con Topany. Not any shade.
No, actually one of our first English pieces, right?
Yes. Well, I mean, yes, because when we did the European show, they were kind of in and out of English.
Right.
Yeah, so our first actual fully English language material, I guess. I just want to say right now, big disclaimer, I love this movie. I love this movie with my entire heart. I've been watching this movie since I was a very small girl. I have no way of seeing this movie other than with like hard eyes. So I'm going to try to be critical, but I will fail miserably because I love this movie. And also this movie has a ton of trigger warnings. I cannot stress it enough. We're talking child abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, incest, rape, sexualization of a minor, anything you could think of that's bad happens here. And of course, you know, white people and their carryings on. So yeah, with that being said, if any of this triggers you,
just don't watch.
Yeah.
Because we can't put a trigger warning for each time it's going to happen. It's just the whole thing is going to be trigger filled.
From minute one,
yeah.
Literally. Yeah.
Yes.
And also, Mason and I are not academics, even though we both did go to college, but we are not people who have degrees in like gender studies and literature. And so there are a lot of things that those who are more informed than us are going to be like, but you missed this and you missed that. We're watching this movie like people who watch movies. So please forgive us if you feel like we haven't delved into the things that you would personally delve into. But again, we're watching this like people who watch movies.
Yeah. But still, bring it up in the comments. I'd love to hear people, you know, what we missed that other people latched onto.
Oh, absolutely. Love to hear about it. So Mason, do you want to give a plot synopsis?
Sure. Quick rundown. Color Purple is about Celie, a woman in the 1920s. It spans, you know, like 1909 to mid 30s, I believe, of her life. She is a Black woman, and she it's essentially her life after being married off to a farmer. He basically just comes to her house one day and is like, I want to marry her sister Nettie. And the dad's like, nope, Nettie's for me, but you can have the ugly one. And so Whoopi Goldberg is sold, essentially just kind of sold to this man to be his wife. And it's a story of her being separated from her sister and how she gets out of a bad situation.
Yes. And the reason why we felt like that, the reason why I wanted to bring this movie to the table is because, number one, it's an amazing film. It's directed by Steven Spielberg, soundtracked by Quincy Jones. But also, there is a very slight and not really portrayed that much on screen lesbian relationship here, which is a very healing relationship, and it's a very freeing relationship. And also one of the characters involved in this lesbian relationship is canonically pansexual. So that is the reason why I thought that this would be an appropriate movie for us to talk about in our kind of more queer offerings that we talk about, but it is not the main thrust of this work. And it's kind of like when we watch The Handmaiden, the relationship at the center of The Handmaiden did empower both women to go through with their plans. But really and truly, it was about at least both of them escaping their lots in life.
Yes.
Yeah. So we start with Celie being pregnant by her father and giving birth to not one, but two children by her father, because we're talking 1909. So there's no taking her to the clinic to take care of things, if you will. Instead, she is giving birth to these babies, and she's not raising these children because the man who raped her is a cruel monster in every sense of the word and snatches her babies from her while they're still wet.
Mm-hmm. I mean, she literally held that baby for a second before he snatched it away. And this is like the second scene of the movie. Like, we're starting strong.
Yes. And so when that happens, afterwards, they have a scene of Celie talking to God for the first time. And if you are familiar with the book is a series of letters. It's not actually chapters. And it's letters that Celie writes to God about her life. And so that's when we get the first set of kind of like spoken narration in the movie. And that becomes a theme throughout the movies, these spoken narration parts. But they're in church with the spoken narration. And that's when we see the character of Mr. And Mr. plays a huge role in this movie because he's initially drawn to Celie's family through Nettie. So he doesn't even see Celie when the story begins. Right. Instead, he sees someone else that he wants and is told that he can't have Celie. And why is it that he can't have Celie?
Because he can't have Nettie?
No, or why he can't have Nettie?
Oh yeah, because the dad wants Nettie for himself. He's like, daughter number 2, let's get to fucking. And you're like, please get away from her. There's a horrifying bit where like, she's just standing on the porch and her dad's like caging her in. It's, oh God. Yeah, not good.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. So he takes Celie, and you know that Celie's not going to have any kind of reprieve from cruelty the minute she gets to Mister's house. First of all, he doesn't even let her ride on the horse. He makes her walk through the snow to his house in the winter while he rides a horse. And when they get to the house, one of the kids picks up a rock and throws it at her head.
She falls to the ground bleeding, and her dad's just like,
yeah, whatever, fuck it.
Yeah.
Then her first night in the home, she spends being sexually assaulted by this stranger, pretty much. And then wakes up to a house that has been severely neglected, that needs to be cleaned from top to bottom. And then after cleaning up the house, she starts to tend to the children who have not been looked after for quite a while. And while she's trying to comb the girl's hair, and the girl is, of course, she's screaming because no one's combed her hair in a really long time and it's in kind of a mess. The man she marries asks her to shut up the child, and she says that she can't. And that's when he proceeds to smack her across the face in a warning of, you are never to talk back to me. So Celie goes from one absolutely horrific situation into another situation of virtual eternal servitude. And then by some miracle, her sister Nettie ends up at her home because the dad just could not keep his hands off of Nettie, who, if we were to guess ages, Nettie is the younger girl, Celie is 14, Nettie's probably 12.
Yeah. 12. Oh my God.
Yeah, she's probably 12. And she manages to make it to her sister's house, hoping to be spared from the sexual advances of her father. But she also is aware that, you know, Mr. came to their house wanting to marry Nettie first. And so she's like, the time will come when he's going to come after me. And when that time comes, the only way I'll ever be able to talk to you is through letters. So let me teach you how to read. Yeah. So go ahead.
Oh, I like the scene where they're like in the kitchen and she just has things taped to her body parts. She's like, what's this? Hair, HAIR hair. I like that scene.
Yeah, so her and her sister have this kind of like golden period where neither of them are afraid of the father trying to molest them. They've got a plan for how they're going to move forward in the future of keeping communication with each other. And they're just enjoying their time together as sisters. And then one day Nettie is walking to school, and it is the scariest scene.
Horrifying. Because Mr. comes riding up all smiley, like da 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 da. He gets off the horse and he starts like smiling like a goof, dancing with her, trying to lead her into the bushes, where she whacks him with her book bag in the nards, and she runs out screaming.
Yes, because I don't know if he thought that by smiling, he was maybe making her feel like, oh, what we're doing is something enjoyable. We're both having fun here, but it's horrifying because she knows exactly what he wants. And from the very minute that she sees him on his horse, she's running. As he comes near her, she's like, no, 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 no. She's constantly reinforcing, I don't want to touch you. I don't want you to touch me. And he's just like, no, this is fun. And all of a sudden you can tell, like, there's a scene where they're off camera where something horrible has just happened. And thank God she runs away. But with his romantic advances being thwarted, he decides Nettie can't stay at his house anymore. And then begins another gut-wrenching scene of him pulling Nettie away.
Physically pulling and ripping them apart, throwing her out of the house.
So that scene in particular, I think it was the first time in the movie that I cried. Like, whenever I watch this movie, I have different moments where I cry. That scene is the first moment in the movie where I cry because it's so physically brutal. Like, he's pulling them and tugging them and throwing the one to the ground, and he's pounding on their hands as they're trying to hold on to a pole. And finally he gets Nettie outside of the fence and he raises up his arm like he's just going to strike her down. And she stands in the street and she yells, why?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's the question that we all are asking at that point in the movie is like, why?
Yeah, why is any of this happening? Why are any of you this mean? Why are they all so mean to them?
Yeah, these are two girls. These are not even grown women. These are children. Why is this happening to children?
Yeah. That scene was filmed rough too. Like, I was getting nervous for the actresses playing them too. I was like, are they okay? Oh man, not a fun day on set.
No, not at all. So Nettie promises to write to her sister saying, nothing but death can keep me from it. I promise you I'm going to write. But Mr. basically implies to Celie, you'll never hear from your sister again. I know your little plan to write letters. You're never going to touch that mailbox. And if you do, I'll hurt you.
Yeah.
So,
man, he threatens to murder her multiple times in this movie.
Yes. The first time he threatens to murder her is when she's shaving him.
The very first shaving scene. Yeah. Before she even touches him with the razor, he goes, if you nick me, I'll murder you. And it's like, okay, then shave yourself. Like,
right. Like, honestly, that's a ballsy move to threaten someone who you've already raped and beaten and then hand them a weapon and say, now you better not hurt me. Because
right?
in all actuality, you have to keep all the sharp things away because they have every reason to want to hurt you.
Right. But yeah. He keeps threatening to murder her.
Yeah.
I will say though, I just want to shout out the young actresses that started off the movie deserve praise. I thought they were both really, really great.
I thought they were wonderful. And I hope that the girl who played Celie was provided with some sort of counseling or therapist to talk to.
Yes.
Because she plays a character who at every turn is told how worthless and ugly she is. And the actress who plays her is not an ugly girl. She's beautiful. Her and Nettie look very, very similar. They look like sisters. And so I don't know how anybody can make the distinction that Celie is ugly and Nettie's not. But to have to go to work and every day hear somebody tell you how ugly you are, that's a lot. Yeah.
I hope they did something. I honestly don't know. It was 1985, so we're probably not kind of a thing.
Probably not. So years later, not many years later, but maybe about 6 or 7 years later, we see Celie reading Oliver Twist, and she's a grown-up now, and she's still miserable. I mean, nothing has changed on that front.
Arguably worse, because at least in the beginning, she would say something back, but she learned that if she said anything, she'd just get hit. So her way of coping was to sit down, shut up, do as you're told. And
Right.
that's really scary.
It is. It is. It's, you know, a lot of times when we talk about subjects that are really hard to talk about, we try to be sensitive to the reason why maybe the victims in situations don't do the thing that maybe we'd like them to do. But one of the things you have to understand about victimhood is that whoever has put you in the place of a victim has shown you that they have power over you. They've shown you they can take advantage of you. And, you know, we talk about why don't people who are victims of domestic violence leave? It's not just about the fact that, you know, maybe they don't have the funds to leave, or maybe they're afraid that this person might follow them. They're basically indoctrinized to believe that they'll never escape this through any means. Like, the reason why somebody like Mr. can say, if you cut me, I'll kill you, is because he's already created a system of oppression around Celie that lets her believe he's right. He'll get me before I can ever get him.
He will. And seriously, if he murdered her, like, bury her out back. They live on a farm in 1909. Who's gonna know? Seriously, who would know? Nettie's gone. She won't know.
Yeah, he could just say she caught. He could say she caught the flu. He could say she got pneumonia. He could say she fell off of a horse. There's any number of accidents that could happen on a farm that would excuse a person being buried very quickly.
Yes. And even if she did decide to run away one night, where would she go? She has no money.
Yes, which is something he brings up towards the end of the movie about like how disadvantaged she is as a person.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember. I think Sophia is who comes up next. I think it's Sophia and then Suge Avery.
Yes, Sophia is next.
Okay, so Harpo is now grown up, kind of, and he brings home the woman he wants to marry, which is Sophia, played by a much younger Oprah Winfrey.
Yes.
Yeah. And Sophia is a different kind of woman than Celie is. She's very much more me.
Oh yeah, I mean, even the way that she's introduced, she is cartoonishly stomping up, like swinging her arms, stomping up the steps to the house.
Yes.
With Harpo chasing after her.
Right. And she very much does not put up with Mr. shit. You know, Mr., when they show up, she's visibly pregnant, and he's like, I think that you are a whore and you're pregnant and you don't know who the dad is and you're trying to trick my son into marrying you. And she very clearly just says, I know who my baby's father is. I don't need your son. I can live with my sister if I want to. So, you know, Harpo, if you want to be with me, you know where to find me, but don't wait too long because I got options.
Right.
Yeah. Which is something you would never hear coming from Celie. You would never hear her say that.
That's probably the first time she saw another Black woman really stand up to Mr. or anyone around her.
Right. And so Harpo makes the decision of marrying Sophia. And I thought it was funny in the church how different their family relations are. So like on Sophia's side, the pews are packed with women and children and colorful clothes. On Harpo's side, there's like a handful of people and they all look like they're attending a funeral.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of this movie, I mean, Spielberg really is that director where you learn about in film school, where you could turn off the sound, not have subtitles on, and you could watch his movies start to finish and know everything that happens because he's visually telling you everything at all times.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes me laugh in the movie where Mr. goes up to Harpo, I guess, to try to hug him. And they act like two people who've never had a hug with anyone in their life.
Yeah.
And then he turns around to, I guess, address Sophia since they're married now. And all of a sudden a wall of women shows up. It's like, I think's not.
Yeah.
So, Sophia is Celie's first female friendship outside of Nettie. And she spends a lot of time around Sophia with Sophia's children, and they have a bond, a friendly bond. I mean, definitely Sophia is kind of the lead in that friendship, but they have a bond. But Harpo growing up with a father like Mr., Sophia's something he doesn't really understand, because really the only relationship he's ever seen between a man and a woman is Mr. beating the shit out of Celie and Celie being mute.
Yes. He expects her to do everything for him. Because Mr. is an incompetent human being, just completely an incompetent person. Even at the beginning, when they first do the time skip, they have the whole scene where she has like a row of things in her hands because she knows that Mr.'s going to come running back for his tie and then running back for this and running back for that, because he is incompetent. And Harpo is the exact same way. And Sophia's like, I'm not going to do it. And he asks Celie, what should I do about it? And she says, she gives the answer, the very sad answer of hit her, because that's all she knows.
Yes. And it's shocking the first time you see this movie that Celie would say that, because you know how much of a victim of violence she's been. And you're like, why would she ever want that on another woman, much less a woman that she's gained a friendly relationship to? But I think that for Celie, she's not even saying it from the perspective of how would I answer this question if somebody was dealing with me. She's looking at it more of in a kind of a societal lens. What does a man do with a woman who doesn't mind?
Right.
This is what you do. And so when Sophia comes to confront Celie, one of my favorite monologues of all time. Oprah Winfrey stomping through the cornfields. You told Harpo to beat me. And you know, she just lays it on the line. Like, as fellow women, you know how hard our lives are. Why would you try to make my life worse? And Phoebe's like, because we're all hoping for death. That's the point she's reached in life, is like, you know, this life is hell, heaven lasts always. Let's all hope we die sooner than later.
Right.
Which Sophia answers, you ought to just go ahead and kill Mr. Worry about heaven later. Which I totally agree with. I think that was the right advice.
Oh, he fell riding the horse.
Like, you know, these out here in these woods, wild animals, they'll spook your horse, throw you off. But yeah, Sophia and Harpo, they exist in this really toxic domestic violence relationship for a while, long enough at least to have 3 kids together.
Yeah.
And then finally she is like, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not even Harpo who makes the ultimate decision to end their relationship. It's Sophia. She's just like, this is some bullshit. And so she takes her children and she leaves. And Harpo ends up back in the house. And then we get the scene with Mr. getting ready to meet Shug Avery.
Ooh, yes. The scene where Shug shows up drunk and starts calling Celie ugly. You're like,
it's so funny, even though it's so mean.
Hey, I guess, you know, they couldn't have you crying the whole time.
Right. I mean, it, like, everything having to do with Shug Avery when she first shows up is comedy. From Shug Avery showing up, and the first thing she sees is Celie covered in mud from playing with the kids, and she's like, "You show is ugly," and then starts cackling. That's comedy. It's comedy when Mr. is like trying to be like, "It's okay, baby, I'm gonna take care of you." She's like, "Get the hell away from me. I need a real man." And then one of my favorite comedic scenes out of this movie, Mr. in the kitchen trying to put together breakfast for Shug Avery.
Again, an incompetent human being.
The fact that he's like, I'm gonna pour kerosene into the stove to make this. I love the scene where Celie pulls up a chair and sits down in it to watch, and as soon as he gets the kerosene out, you just see the empty chair and the flash from the flame of the stove. But yeah, that doesn't work. The breakfast is terrible. Shug rejects it, much like she rejects Mr. And then Celie's like, I'm gonna make food for her, because for some reason Celie doesn't harbor any ill will towards Shug, even though Shug Avery's picture was on the nightstand the very first night she arrived at the house when she was being sexually assaulted. But she's like, I'm interested in who this person is. I'm fascinated. I've been seeing her picture for years. I just really want to see her. And she kind of treats her the way you would treat like a stray dog. Kind of like, yeah, like I'm gonna see if I can feed you first. And if you'll take food from me, then I'm gonna try to get you a bath. And then I'm gonna try. But yeah, she's fascinated by Shug, absolutely fascinated, and they develop a friendship, which again, surprising because Shug doesn't seem like she would have a lot in common with someone like Celie from the outset, because Shug is very much an independent woman and Celie is not. Celie is very much a servant. And so the fact that they would even have any commonalities is strange until in the bathtub when Shug says, does your daddy love you? My dad loves me. He just doesn't know it yet. And it's one of those moments where you're like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know what she meant by that.
Well, I think, and later on, Shug has a reconciliation with her father, who's a pastor.
Right.
But I think what it is that a lot of us have very complicated relationships with our parents. I think most people who haven't been abused by their parents, but are in like maybe relationships that aren't the healthiest, they continue to try to work on those relationships because they believe at the core of those relationships, there is a love there. And that love is something I'm trying to honor in trying to repair these relationships. Like I may feel you don't see me, or I may feel like you're not listening to me, or I may feel you've done something to hurt me, but I really know you love me. Therefore, I'm willing to not completely cut off contact with you or kick you out of my life. And I think that that's something that Celie and Shug kind of share, because Shug, she talks about the fact that she's got children and that all of her children live with her parents. And I imagine that when she was showing up to her parents' home with these kids, but without a husband and not in the confines of a marriage, they were probably like, we're really ashamed about this. Because we're talking about, you know, the early 20th century. So this was very taboo. And so she's like, I feel like maybe I've let them down. Maybe this is my fault that our relationship is like this, because I've done all these things that are socially looked down upon, but I truly believe they love me. And who knows what she's getting that belief from. It could be from the fact that they're accepting these children, that she's like, well, if they didn't love me, they would turn my children away.
Right.
Yeah. But it is interesting that, you know, that kind of relationship with fathers becomes a tie between Shug and Celie. So after that, Shug is recovered and decides to perform at Harpo's Juke Joint. And this is probably like the biggest broad comedy segment of the movie.
Yeah, it like becomes a real musical for a minute. I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know we were getting musical numbers.
Yeah, so Shug is performing in the Juke Joint, and the men are just hound dogs over her. There's one guy that's like, girl, you're so fine, I drink your bath water. And it's just, you know, like the old Tex Avery cartoons where like the wolf's mouth jets open and his tongue unfurls. Like that's going on, but with people. And while we're in there and everyone's having a good time, Harpo, we discover, has a new girlfriend because, you know, him and Sophia split up. And his new girlfriend is the literal opposite of Sophia in every way, shape, and form. Like she's petite, where Sophia is a little heavier. She is a lighter complexion than Miss Sophia, who's darker. She looks way younger. And she's got this super high-pitched voice, whereas Sophia has, I wouldn't say a masculine voice, but definitely a deeper female voice.
Right.
And it is the girlfriend who initiates the fight that ends up closing down the Juke Joint for the night. It's such a funny fight because literally you spend the whole time thinking, girl.
Over him? Really?
Right. Because Because Harpo is a dweeb.
He's a dweeb. It's like, why don't you two get together and leave him?
Absolutely. Like, he's just such a chicken shit. And it's like, why are y'all fighting over him? And actually, Sophia's not even fighting this woman over Harpo. She's upset because homegirl calls her a big fat heifer.
Mm-hmm.
Which I agree, Sophia. I think I'd want to fight too. But yeah, she's like, you're saying all this stuff to me, but every single time you're like, Harpo's my man. Sophia's like, fine by me. I'm done with him. I don't even want him no more. You can have. But yeah, that causes a fight to break out. And Celie is she's just the audience at that point.
She runs away. She's like, I go out town for the first time in 5 years, and this is what I get? Mm-mm.
Oh, she's so funny. But after the juke joint busts up, Celie and Suge are having a moment being girlfriends. And I find this weird. I don't know if this is a trope in lesbian movies. So anyone who watches a lot of lesbian movies, you'll have to tell me if this is a fact. Is trying on another woman's clothes the prelude to sex?
I'll have to ask some lesbians I know.
Because in The Handmaid's Tale, the same thing happens.
I could see that. Being like, oh, wear my dress. Oh, ha ha ha, tee hee hee, let me slip you a finger.
Yeah, like, I don't know what it is. Like, here, let me undress you and put on my clothes. Oh, your body looks so great in my clothes. Yeah, and then all of a sudden, like, fingers in orifices. But yeah, like, is that a lesbian trope? Because we have literally that same scene here where Suge put Celie in her juke joint costume, and it looks ridiculous on Celie. It just does. It looks ridiculous on her. But while they're kind of laughing and giggling, that's when Suge kind of, lets on to Celie that, hey, why are you so unhappy? Like, you're such a fun person. Like, as I've gotten to know you, I like you. And that's when Celie's like, I live a miserable life with a man who uses the bathroom on me on a daily basis. And so I have no basis for joy.
Mm-hmm.
And Suge, who is canon pansexual, is like, I could give you something to be happy about. And their conversation ends in Celie's first real kiss.
First real kiss, and the first time someone ever complimented her smile. She was always hiding her smile.
Because literally the first thing that her father says at the beginning of the movie is like, Celie, you got the ugliest smile in creation.
Yes, it's like, I think that's the opening line of the movie too.
Yes.
Like, I think it's just her and her sister frolicking for a bit, and then the dad's like, you have a shitty smile. And it's like, well, all right.
I see we chose violence. Yeah. But like her dad tells her she's ugly. Mr. has always reinforced that she's ugly and she was a second choice. And even Suge, when they first meet, is like, you sure is ugly. Yeah. So, I mean, imagine going your whole life with the only confirmation you get about your appearance is that you are ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, someone looks at you and tells you you're beautiful. And they give you an affirming touch rather than a violent, selfish, violent touch. And it's just, it opens new doors for Celie. And in the book, more than a kiss happens. Because I've read the book. It's been many years since I read the book. But in the book, Celie and Suge pet kittens together with their tongues.
Ooh, nice. Yeah. Good for them.
Yeah.
I wish Spielberg had the balls to do it, but he did not. So
I will just put it this way. What lustful sex scene has Spielberg ever given us?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I'm not saying it to be critical, but like people who are like, oh, I wish that Steven Spielberg would have gone there. Steven Spielberg doesn't even go there with straight couples.
Yeah.
So.
I thought that I was gonna make a really bad joke about, like, some bad Jaws joke about someone fucking the shark, but it died.
Why are you like this? The why we're not considered movie critics, because yes, Jaws. Okay, anyway. So after this scene with Celie and Shug, Celie's like, my nose is wide open, my legs are open as well. I'm willing to give Shug everything. And when Shug is getting ready to leave town, Celie's like, I'm going with my bitch. I'm getting my shit together. I'm going. And as she's like in this frantic, like running in circles trying to get together to leave, here comes Mr. I hate this man. I hate this man so much. And yes, he's just like, where do you think you going? So of course, she's not gonna go. And also, we're still in like 1916, 1917. When she's telling Shug goodbye, you know, you can see on her face she wants to be like, take me with you. I will go with you. Or even just to say, I love you. And she can't say a word except, I'll miss you.
Yeah.
And then she was like, oh, I'll miss you too, girl. And leaves, and Celie just passes the fuck out.
Gal pals.
And they were roommates.
And Mr.'s like annoyed that she passed out. He's like,
yeah. And it's like, well, maybe if you had not had her carry all of the luggage, she could have had a little bit more strength. Celie is the pack mule in this movie. Like, she's always carrying something. But yeah, so that happens. And, you know, it's unfortunate that that chapter, that bright spot in Celie's life disappears. But then after that, we have the story of Miss Sophia and how she ends up ruined.
One of the worst parts of this movie. Not worse as in like bad, but like just the poor woman. No words. No words.
Yeah. So Sophia, we've already established, is a very kind of strong-willed woman. She's used to defending herself, defending her rights, and not letting people tread over her. But even if you can control that in your interpersonal relationships, again, white people and their shenanigans, you can only go so far with that. And so Sophia's in town with her children, and Miss Millie, the mayor's wife, goes up to her and tells her how clean her babies are, and then says, do you want to be my maid? And as a person whose family grew up in the South, I think on this rewatch, like paying really close attention, I'm like, this is an unrealistic answer. Because my family, had that been one of us, would have been like, well, ma'am, I actually have another job, so I can't do it. That's how we would have answered that. Because when you grow up in the South, you learn how to talk to white people, because if you don't talk to them the right way, shit like this happens. Instead, Miss Sophia says, hell no. And Miss Millie, who is a fragile white woman, is like, I have never been spoken to like this, especially not from somebody who socioeconomically, I don't feel has the right to speak to me this way. And her husband comes over and says, what did you say to my wife? And she proceeds to repeat it, and he strikes her about the face. Now, if you want to know how I'm watching the movie at this point, just look at how the men who she came to town with are. That's literally me. That, no, Sophia, no.
Oh yeah, you see her fist ball up and pow. I mean, he earned it, but so she gets taken away, and they put her like, I mean, I think she gets definitely abused because her face is like deformed by the time we see her next.
In the book, she's blind in one eye. She has several broken ribs. She's concussed. She's beaten, and she's imprisoned for 12 years before she finally is let out of prison to eventually become Miss Millie's maid.
Yep. And you just see like who, when we first see her in the movie, is like a feisty, lovable character, just completely stripped of all of that. She's like, yes, ma'am. Yes, Miss Millie. Like, she can barely even speak above a whisper. I think the scene though where she goes back to her family for the first time in 8 years might be like maybe the most horrifying in the movie for me. Because she finally gets to see her family for the first time in 8 years. And Miss Millie's like, aren't I doing you a kindness? You get to stay with them for a whole day. I can drive myself back this time. She gets there. The family's like, she reunites with the family and she says, they ask her, why are you crying? And she goes, because I don't know you people anymore. And she's right. Like, her kids have grown up and they're like, yeah, we don't even recognize her because we were young, except the one older son who she has like a moment with when she's stepping in. She shakes his hand, and because he was there that day, and he probably remembers it the most out of all of his siblings. And then this fucking lady is too down to live, and Miss Millie, not Sophia, Miss Millie cannot figure out how to drive anymore apparently, and she just keeps bumping into shit in their house. So all the men outside are like, whoa, 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 hold it, lady. And, she's racist. And, the coalition of white lady tears start popping out. And Miss Sophia puts back on her coat. And the day she was supposed to spend with her family, she has to drive back because Miss Millie says, how could you leave me alone for so long?
All the things that this woman has stolen from Sophia, like in that moment, you can see it. You can see just how much she's stolen from Sophia. Mm-hmm. She's stolen Sophia's freedom. She's stolen Sophia's life as a mother. She's stolen her kids, basically.
Yeah.
And she's stolen the hope that Sophia had of ever getting to know these people.
Yeah. It does get to, so this is the one question I had about Miss Sophia's storyline, is it does seem like after that scene, it seems like she's kind of back with the family permanently after that. And I don't know what happened in between.
I'm not sure either. And it's been a long time since I've read the book. It's been almost 20 years since I read the book, because I read the book back when I was in high school. So it's been a while. But it does seem like she does eventually return to the family. I'm assuming that maybe she did another 5 years with Miss Millie before finally she was released from bondage.
Right.
But yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because that's just a fact. It's a fact that this happens. In fact, It's surprising that Sophia wasn't killed on the spot. It's surprising that a literal lynch mob didn't form and she was yoked up in that moment.
That is the one thing we didn't do.
Right. And I think that it's almost crueler to not kill her in that moment than to go about systematically breaking her and then making her do the thing that she did not want to do originally.
Yes. Being in servitude to the woman that put you through all of that and took you away from your family, blinded you, like all this is on Millie.
Yeah. Millie should never eat in my presence if I was Sophia, because everything would be laced with cyanide.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why does all our food smell like almonds? Because that's my flavoring of choice. Like, no, it's because it's filled with brown. So yeah, so that's Sophia's kind of fate, really. But Suge comes back to town, and Albert and Celie are just delighted. Like, they both scramble out the bed to run downstairs to greet their woman, and she's back in town with her new husband.
Yep. And they're both like, fuck.
Yes. Celie's like, we're getting over colds.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's back with her new husband, and Celie, of course, is trying to, look at the positive. She's like, well, even if you're with a man, you're here, and that's all that matters to me, because when you were fucking Mister, I didn't care as long as you were here. But, it is kind of one of those things where she's hurt, because she, I guess, maybe for the first time held out hope that if Suge comes back, maybe it's for me.
Right.
Yeah, and her being married very clearly says, like, maybe it's not for you. Like, I've moved on. So they show up around Easter time. And while everyone is at the table coloring Easter eggs, getting just blotto drunk.
Yeah.
The mail comes, and Shug, who doesn't know the history of Celie and her sister, I guess, she heads to the mailbox to get some mail because she's expecting some. And she sees this letter from Nettie. And they go upstairs because she knows that if they're caught reading this letter around Mr., that all hell's going to break loose. They go upstairs to read this letter, and it is just agony watching her read this letter. Because she had convinced herself over the last 20 plus years, my sister's dead. It's been almost 30 years since I've seen her. My sister's dead. Because her sister told her nothing but death would keep me from writing you.
Right.
Yeah. And she opens this letter where her sister's saying, not only am I not dead, your children aren't dead either. We're all alive. We're all alive.
We're alive. We're doing well. We're in Africa. You have our address.
Yeah. And it's just, I can't even imagine what that must feel like.
Right?
Like, I'd be ruined. The rest of the day, I'd be like, I've caught whatever mystery illness people have, because I can't move, I can't talk, I can't do any housework. You have to shove me in a corner and let me cry. Yeah.
So then they, after reading the letters, go hunting somewhere in the house. I guess I'd missed the shots where.
I think that they were in their bedroom, because they were like in a dresser and then going through drawers. So I think they were in like Celie and Mr.'s bedroom. Yeah.
And they're basically just looking for where are the other letters, you know? And it's also the first time you see Celie get back at Mr. in some way. And metaphorically though, because like she sees this, like, you know, he has like his hat and coat hung up around like one of them the body things you see in like a store.
Yeah, like a dress form.
Yeah, dress form. And she looks at it and she just goes and knocks it over, because she's on the hunt for these letters. You know, she's pissed at him. They find them. They're under the floorboards. She finds a stack of cash and a bunch of letters. And, you know, I would have taken it and ran. I would have been like, Shug, we're leaving.
Oh yeah, I'd be like, this cash and these letters, these are all my belongings. That's why they're together. Let's go.
Yeah, I'd be like, we're going to Africa.
Yeah.
So yeah, she basically then spends all this time reading up on her sister and where she's been, you know, the last 20, 30 years.
Right. And she finds herself kind of, I wouldn't say lost, but like she completely escapes her current world to be in these worlds that her sister writes in these letters. Like when she's in church in Africa. When she's by the bank of the river, she's at a river in Africa. Like she's completely escaping into these letters, because not only are they proof that her sister is alive and that her sister's been thriving and that her children are alive and her children are thriving, but it's also proof that like this misery that Celie's been imagining for her whole life and that maybe she thought her sister was having to deal with, that's not the world. The world is so much more. And it's a journey that she could never take, because she's bound just as much as if she had a shackle around her ankle. But then while being lost in her sister's letters, she doesn't hear Mr. calling her that he needs a shave.
And she's like, okay, you want to shave? I'll shave ya. So she spends a good long time sharpening this knife. All the while, Shug is like, oh, like some kid runs by and she's like, where's Celie? And she goes, oh, she's about to give Mr. a shave. And she's like, okay, that sounds, ooh, she's about to murder him. So she starts running towards the house. And she's right, because Celie is about to slit his throat, Sweeney Todd style. And right before she's about to, Shug runs up and like, you know, literally physically restrains her. And I think it's the first time you see Mr. afraid.
Yeah.
Because he was like, oh, she was actually going to kill me this time. And Whoopi's like, yeah, I was gonna murder you.
Yeah, well, like, you fucking bloodied up my nose, and then you spend the entire time talking about how lazy I am and how I need to move my ass and how I'm so stupid, and like,
Mhm.
you're asking for this. You
Mhm.
want me to murder you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm shocked how long Suge and her husband stay with Celia and Mister, because they arrive before Easter and they're there until Christmas.
Yeah, I don't know why they were there for so long.
They're there a really long time. But on Christmas Day, Suge informs Mister that her and her husband are getting ready to leave. And this is when everything comes to a head, because she's like, we're taking Celia with us.
Mm-hmm. And Celia, I'm really glad that they gave us that big movie moment where Celia, stands up for herself, calls Suge out. I mean, it's one of the best scenes in the movie for sure. She takes the knife, slams it on the table, holds it up to him, and I'm like, do it, do it, do it. And she doesn't. Everyone around her is right. They're like, he's not worth it. And I'm like, he's not, but you should still kill him.
Yeah, because I mean, of the people at the table, the grandfather would have been the one who told the cops the truth.
Right.
So yeah, you're gonna get away with it. But yeah, like, she basically just lets him know, like, this is the state of affairs. You may not understand why I would leave, but you've done nothing to make my life here worth staying. You've raped me, you've beaten me, your kids were terrible to me, you never even tried to raise them. You cheated on me incessantly, and I've got this whole other family that you kept from me. So why would I stay? And that's when he basically tells her lot in life. You are ugly. You are a woman. You are Black. You are poor. What are you going to do if you're not under the protection of a man? And that's when she's like, I don't give a shit.
Right.
And I think there's just something so incredibly brave about deciding that I would rather just take my chances with homelessness than to be here another minute.
Mm-hmm.
Because for those of you who aren't sure, I need you to understand that Mister in this movie and the circumstances that Celia lives in this movie would have been almost the highest status you could get as a Black person at that time. Because this is the time, maybe about 50 to 60 years removed from the end of the Civil War. And so for a Black person to own a multi-level house and own acreage of land and be able to make money off of your land, and for your family to be able to gather at a large table with, fine cutlery and everything else like that, these were very wealthy Black people. Like my family, one-room shacks, basically. And so, like, watching this movie, I watched it with my family. We all watched it on New Year's together. And yeah, it was great. It was my grandma, my mom, my sister, me. We all watched it together. And my mom was like, yeah, these are rich Black people. So in a lot of ways, even though Celia was miserable, she was living probably one of the most comfortable existences you could live as a Black person at that time. Also, let us not forget, the country was going through the Great Depression during this time, because the Great Depression was like the late 20s through the 30s up until about World War II.
Right.
So to be Black people, go ahead.
I said, and they were fine. I mean, the Great Depression, I don't even think comes up in this movie.
Yeah, and they're like, they've got cars, they've got houses, they've got property, and they're Black. So, I mean, her walking away from this, there's a lot of women who would not have been able to do that at that time.
Right. Yeah.
So she leaves and she basically lets him know, I'm taking my chances in the streets, but I curse you. Because you have ruined my life. Like anything wrong that has ever happened to me, it starts at your door. And so I hope that you live a miserable existence. I hope you always keep a urinary tract infection. I hope that you have a hair that grows out of your anus that you can never pull and that it constantly issues. I hope that you find that every single time you're looking for a sock, there's always a hole. I hope that until you do right by me, everything you even think about crumbles.
It's a great monologue.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. She's the best. And so we finally see Celie free. And with that, a lot of other things come to a conclusion as well. We finally get the fate of her father, who, even though it's little consolation, we do find out he is not her biological father. He was her stepfather, and her children are not her siblings.
Yes.
Which, I mean,
it's the least they could do narratively.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it doesn't ease anything because this is obviously a man who she thought was her father because she had known him since she was a child.
Right.
And also, it doesn't help any because she still went through the years of believing that she was raped by a blood family member.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, the trauma's still there for sure.
Oh, yeah, the trauma still exists. But with his death, that gives closure to that chapter in a way. But also, she finds out that, like, she's got a home. She's got a home. Her mother, when she died, the land belonged to her father, who was lynched by white people. So again, all of Celie's trauma goes right back to systemic racism and white people shenanigans. But yeah, she has a home and she's able to have a life that Mr. thought she could never have. But yeah, Celie's biological father, it's said in the book and it's said in the movie, he was lynched by a mob of white people for being a successful Black person. So yeah, if white people and their shenanigans had never gotten involved, there's a good chance that Celie's stepfather would have never raped her. And maybe she would have had a different fate. Maybe. But yeah, she has a home now. Go ahead.
You said, yeah, you could hope.
Yeah. So she has a home now. She starts a business making pants, and you know, she's living as well as she can for the situation. But Mr., much like Celie told him, falls apart.
Oh yeah, the man is incompetent and he basically loses everything. And he's like, fine, I'll do one good thing, the only nice thing I've ever done in my life. And he pays for Nettie and her children to come fly out to see Celie.
And this is the moment where we have the final big cry. Celie is on the porch of her childhood home, and it's a home that's now filled with people that she loves rather than people who are terrorizing her. And she sees in the distance this big swath of purple and red fabric. And it's her sister. And her sister runs to her. And like, they don't even kind of hug at first. They kind of just stop. And are like, are you real? And they have to touch each other to confirm that, like, I'm not imagining you here. And they share a kiss and an embrace. And it's just, you can see like Celie's, Whoopi Goldberg's face in this movie is she's just stunned. She can't even smile. She can't laugh. Her mouth is just agog because she's like, everything I've ever dreamed of is staring me in the face. And I don't, am I dead? Seriously, am I dead? But yeah, like she meets her children for the first time. She meets her son and she meets her daughter and her daughter-in-law, and she gets to know that like it's real. And I just, you know, I just can't imagine what that's like. I can't imagine what that's like. You know, I couldn't imagine when the letter came and she's like, we're not dead. But there's one thing hearing it and it's another thing seeing it.
Right.
And to see the only person in your early life who actually loved you and to get that love back after so long has just it's got to make your heart burst.
Yeah.
Because Nettie was the only person who loved Celie this whole time. No one else Shug came to love her later. I think Miss Sophia loved her as a friend, but the only love she ever had from the time she was a child up until her adulthood was her sister Nettie. No one else loved her. And she lived so long without love. And to have that original love return, it's just, it's making my eyes water now.
Yeah.
You know?
I have to wipe them too.
And this is where the movie ends, and it's where it should end. I mean, yeah, I'm sure Mr. would love to get back together with Celie, but I, just like in the book, she's like,
No.
no, thank you. No, thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, this is what she needed. This is what she needed to heal completely.
Yeah. The Color Purple 2, Celie is happy now. Please. I would watch it.
I would just watch, you know, her family's adventures in America and, you know, how they are adjusting. But like, this movie just means so much to me in so many ways. And it's such a personal story for me and for my family and for all of the Black women that I've ever lived with and all the women that I've ever loved in my life, be it my daughter, my mother, my grandmother, my sister, my cousins, my female friends. Like, this is such a personal story for us. And I thought really hard about telling this story before we did this. And I was like, do I really want to put this out on the internet? But I said, you know what? A lot of people, after watching this movie, they acknowledged kind of their traumas because they felt like there was now space to say it. So I'll acknowledge mine. When I was 6 years old, 5 or 6, I don't remember the exact year now, my parents had already separated, my mom and my biological father. And he and my mom had separated because he had beat my mother. He had actually broke her ankle at one point, and they had a really violent relationship. Like, she had to hit him in the head with an iron skillet. Like, it was that kind of thing. And they broke up when I was 2 years old. And then she met my stepfather when I was 3. And throughout my life, my stepfather practically raised me. But early on, when I was a child, I used to visit my biological father, and he had a drug problem. And there's a lot of things that he did that I know were impacted by drugs. But during one of my visits to see him before my family moved on, we moved out of the country with the military. One of the last visits I had with him, I was staying at his trailer, and my uncle was sleeping in the living room, and I was sleeping in my dad's room because this trailer only had one bedroom. And I was sleeping on the bed with him, and he's like, I want to play a game with you. I'm like, all right, let's play a game. And you know, I'm 6, so of course, any opportunity to play, I'm like, let's go for it. And he's like, okay, I'm gonna play a game, and the game is try to guess what you're touching. I'm like, all right, cool, let's do this. So he's like, put your hand here. And he moves my hand here. He's like, what are you touching? I'm like, I'm touching your arm. And he's like, okay, cool. Move your hand here. What are you touching? Touching your shoulder. And then eventually, as you probably could guess, my hand's touching something that I didn't even know what to call it because I'm 6 years old. And he's like, you know, keep touching it. And I'm scared because this is my dad. I know he's my dad, even though him and my mom were separated. I know this is my dad because I used to visit him every summer, and I'm scared and I don't know what to do. So rather than continue, I got out of the bed and I ran to the living room, and I asked my uncle, like, can you go check on dad because he's being really weird? And I tell him what happened, and my uncle, God rest his soul because he's passed away since then, he went into my dad's room and they fought. And I don't know what the fight was like because I wasn't in there. I was in the living room. And after that, I spent the rest of my summer with my aunt. Like, I never saw my dad again that summer. And that was the last summer we were in the States before we moved away. And then I came back one more time while we were living in a foreign country to visit my mother's parents, and I saw my dad. And when I saw him, he didn't know me. Like, he didn't know my name. He didn't recognize who I was because he was on drugs and he was high, and I looked different, so he didn't know who I was. And I remember being so hurt because the last time I had seen him, I felt like I had made him mad because I had told on him to my uncle. And then I see him again and he doesn't acknowledge who I am. Like, he doesn't see me. He doesn't hug me. He doesn't tell me anything good because he doesn't know me. And so we finally come back from living overseas, and I'm 12, and we stop in the state that my family's from, and we see him, and he's just gotten off of drugs. And he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for everything I did while I was high. I'm sorry for everything I didn't do. And I'm working on myself. and I promise you I'm going to get better, and we're going to be together, and you're going to live with me again, and everything's going to be better. And I'm so grateful that he did that, because I was so worried that he hated me, because I thought I had gotten him in trouble. And then 5 months after that conversation, he dies. Like, just he has pneumonia because he had been a drug addict and he had a really weakened immune system. He caught pneumonia and he passed away. So the last conversation I had with my biological father, he apologized for everything. But for a long time, I couldn't figure out my feelings for him, because on the one hand, I loved him very, very much. And he's my dad. And so who I am, I have to say I get something from him, whether it's the way my face looks, or it's the way that I act, or the things that I like. Part of him lives in me. But I was so hurt and I was so angry that he would do something like that to me, because he's my dad. And why would you put me in a position to have to deal with that? Why would you think that that was okay? And for many, many years, I didn't know how to feel, and I couldn't talk about him. And I even had a hard time talking to my mom about it, because I didn't want her to not let me see him again. Because after it happened when I was 6, I didn't tell her again until I was 10 and I saw him that second time, because I thought if I tell her, she'll never let me see him again. But then when I saw him that second time and he didn't know who I was, I'm like, I can tell my mom, because he doesn't want to see me anyway. And I think that's the reason why, like I said, it's hard for me to be critical about this movie, because men in my life have hurt me a lot. And having my own father hurt me in that way, I spent a lot of time with barricades when it came to the world of men. And I found just infinite comfort in the world of women and in the lives of women and in my relationship with women. And that's the thing about this movie, is that the men in this movie are so hurtful to these women. And so they come to build communities with each other, because these men they're not reliable, and these men are hurt as well. Like, let's not ignore that. Mister's the way he is because his father is domineering, and his father is hurtful, and his father wouldn't let him marry the woman he wanted to marry initially. Harpo's the way he is because his dad is domineering and violent and hurtful. So the only way he knows how to deal with Sophia is to be a monster himself. Generational trauma is real. And these men dealing with a society where there's also, systematic racism, and they can't have any kind of real powerful role in their country because they're Black men. They express the feelings they can't express through physical violence and mistreating these women. And then these women, if we're talking about a totem pole, they're at the very bottom of this totem pole. All they can rely upon is each other. That's all they have. Mm. And so I think it's beautiful that in these friendships with these women, not only do they find a way to give comfort to each other and empower each other to take each other from their lowest moments and reverse some of that trauma. Sophia is healed through the kindness of Celie. To take that, and then for at least one male character, find a way to redeem them. Because even though Harpo is a dweeb and is a dipshit and is just, he's dumb, in a way, he gets redeemed through Sophia when he realizes, I contributed to this. I drove her from my home, and I am the one who made her vulnerable to the predation of white people. And I'm going to spend the rest of my time trying to curry back her favor, spend the rest of my time trying to be the man I should have been from the beginning, the man who just truly loved her. So, I mean, I have a hard time seeing this movie as anything other than like chicken soup for the soul, if you will, because it's such a personal story. And the fact that it ends with healing. It doesn't end with forgiveness necessarily, but it ends in healing. And in that way, it helps me to find healing in my situations.
Thank you for sharing your story. I'm very sorry. I hope you didn't feel like you had to share it. I know it's a very personal story, but I'm glad that this movie speaks to you. I'm glad art can speak to you and give you some healing. I think that's one of the great things about art. And you give us your own art. You give us the art of speech. You give us so much personality in your YouTube videos. I mean, we became friends because I was a fan of your videos, and they were really good videos, and I liked what you had to say, and I was always interested to see what you were going to talk about next. You could literally talk about what color you would paint your walls, and I would watch that video. If you were 3 hours like, I'm looking at paint swatches for 3 hours, I'd be like, yeah, Sam always has something interesting to say. She always brings up something nuanced that I could never even think of. So, I mean, the fact that you just a few days ago could have a 3-hour live stream and people are interacting with you the whole time, clearly, you know, you are much well liked and loved. You are the core of the show. You are a core person in my life, and I hope the world brings you nothing but happiness for the rest of your days. That makes it sound like you're dying tomorrow. No.
Well, you know, COVID's always waiting around the corner for us all, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, but I truly just wish you the best because you deserve it. You've earned it.
Thank you. I'm going to take that compliment and I'm not going to refute it.
Good.
But that's what art does. Art gives you the opportunity to not only see yourself, but maybe try to find some grace for yourself. You know, maybe try to find a way to process your traumas, especially for those of us who don't have access to mental health care, who can't afford a therapist, can't afford a professional. Sometimes you take art and you use it to re-examine some things, or maybe to finally give words and voice to something that you wanted to, but you just didn't know how. And I think that's the thing with this movie. It's words that women wanted to say but didn't know how. And I found a weird parallel between kind of being gay and being a Black woman, in that when this book first came out, plus when the movie came out, a lot of Black men were like, this is going to set back the civil rights movement because you're making Black men look like predators and you're portraying us with nothing but violence. And, you know, how can white people think good about us when Black people are saying this is what Black men are like? But, you know, within every community, there is a sub-community. And there's things that we know as a whole that we may not say to outsiders because we don't necessarily think that that's a conversation for them. But eventually you have to have the conversation. And if it gets outside of our community, that's sometimes a byproduct, but it's something we have to say, because we can't keep allowing one part of our community to constantly bear the pain and the hurt and the violence in order to keep up appearances. And I think it's like that in the gay community. A lot of times in the gay community, no one wants to talk about domestic violence between partners because it looks bad. No one wants to talk about how the trans community is still kind of considered other in the gay community. No one wants to talk about the classism and the racism and the lookism in being a gay man, and how you get on Grindr and it's no fatties, no femmes, no Black, you know? And we tell each other, let's not give out our dirty laundry to other people because we're still fighting for rights. But why can't we inside the community, who are disadvantaged members of that community, fight for our own rights? Why do we have to wait for the Black man to be free, for the Black woman to be free? Why do we have to wait for the wealthy cisgender white gay man to get his rights in marriage, but we can't talk about in our own communities, there's violence being perpetrated to members that aren't cisgendered, to members that aren't white, to members that don't look like a fucking beach party advertisement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, like this movie, when it came out, it had a mixed bag of reviews. And because of that, even though it had 11 Academy Award nominations, it won nothing.
Nothing. It was the most nominated movie of the year, and it won for nothing.
Yeah. And Whoopi Goldberg eventually did win an Oscar for a different role, but it was as a supporting actress in the movie Ghost.
Yeah, it was the story of Whoopi's Oscar loss is very interesting because Whoopi lost to what is essentially a makeup Oscar. Geraldine Page was the most nominated actress to have never won at the time. She had like 7 or 8 nominations, no wins. And she was old, and she is revered to this day as one of the greatest actresses of all time. And it was just kind of like the stars had aligned for her narratively. They were like, she's old, we all love her, she was good in this movie, let's give her the win. And seriously, like, it was a big win for her because you don't get standing ovations at the Oscars. That's not a thing, but she did. That's very rare. And that just shows how much the industry loved her. But it was a makeup win, and the person with the better performance that night was Whoopi. I mean, for sure. The fact that Whoopi does not have an Oscar to her name from this performance is a travesty. Shea Coulee, as Sam sent me a few earlier this morning, is right. The first reparations is giving Whoopi the Oscar for Color Purple. But it's interesting that Whoopi's Oscar win is a makeup win, even though she lost to a makeup win. Very interesting.
Yes, it is. Also, Steven Spielberg was not nominated for anything for this movie. And a big part of the criticism also was the fact that he was a white man who made a Black movie. And people were like, I don't think that we should give him an award for doing this because Hollywood is very racist as well. And I think that that is something that we deal with on this show a lot. I'm a Black woman and Mason is a white man, and we talk a lot about Asian media. And there's probably a lot of people who are like, you shut your dirty, filthy mouth. What do you know about this? This is not your lane. Don't talk. But one of the things that Whoopi actually had to say about this movie is that she felt like even though this movie came out many, many years ago, the reason why this movie still connects and you can watch it today and it still feels like a fresh movie is because it's a human story. And I think that's the thing that we try to spend the most time talking about when we're doing our reviews is we're talking about human stories. That's what makes them feel. If these were stories that were simply about, you know, what it's like to be a specific part of a niche community and it only spoke in nicheisms, maybe we wouldn't connect to it as much. But the pieces that we tend to gravitate towards, the pieces that we hold in high esteem, they're human stories. I Told Sunset About You is a human story.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
It's for sure a film that, you know, I don't think it'll age poorly. In fact, it's only aged better because this, again, the generational trauma, it's still there, as you said. And even now, and generational trauma as like a story point is really popular right now. I mean, look at Encanto. That's why people love it so much.
And, you know, it's been a story that not only translated to the screen has been successful, but it became a very successful Broadway play or musical. And Cynthia Erivo?
I always say Erivo, but I could be wrong.
I think it's Erivo. Her career was basically built on her playing Celie on Broadway, but Celie's been played by Fantasia Barrino, who won a year of American Idol. A lot of really famous women have been a part of The Color Purple, but it's a story that just doesn't get old ever because it is something that is so timeless, these human stories. You know, the oppression Olympics continues to this very day. people are still getting gold medals left and right. One of the things, though, that we have to make sure we talk about before we conclude any discussion on this, though, is much like if we were talking about Harry Potter, we have to talk about the author. We have to talk about Alice Walker and just how fucking disappointing she's been in recent years.
I was reading about this movie, and because I wanted to, like, there's a lot to talk about, so I wanted to read a lot of articles written by Black women specifically. I wanted to read articles about, because that's the movie's for, so why am I reading it from anyone else's point of view? So I was reading a lot of articles, and this one article was like, oh, by the way, plot twist towards the end of the article, Alice Walker is an anti-Semite who supports Holocaust deniers. And it's like, oh, okay. What the fuck?
It
and
is.
as a Jewish person, I was like, well, this is a turn in my reading today.
It is wild. It is absolutely wild. So I'm going to try to pull up the Wikipedia, because when I read what this book was, well, what the Wikipedia says the book was about, like, you've got to be kidding me. There's no fucking way that someone that talented and that smart would ever possibly believe something that fucking stupid or ever endorse anything that stupid. But I'm just going to read this quick little thing about her anti-Semitism that's from Wikipedia. It says, in May 2013, Walker expressed appreciation for the works of the British conspiracy theorist David Icke. On BBC Radio 4's Desert Island Discs, she said that Icke's book about human race, Get Off Your Knees, The Lion Sleeps No More, would be her choice if she could have only one book. The book promotes the theory that the Earth is ruled by shape-shifting reptilian humanoids and Rothschild Zionists. Literally a book about lizard people, y'all. Lizard people.
It's a lot.
And then in 2017, she published an anti-Semitic poem on her blog called "It is Our Frightful Duty to Study the Talmud." And in the poem, it includes the lines, "Are Goyim," who are non-Jewish people, "meant to be slaves of Jews?" And the line, "Are 3-year-old and a day girls eligible for marriage and intercourse? Are young boys fair game for rape?"
Which is a misquote.
Yes. And it stings and it hurts, and it's so disappointing how these people with really smart ideas, really bright ideas, when they're in their 20s, 30s, just become so irrelevant and stuck in these weird, demented conspiracy theorist modes of thought. And it's just like, girl, who hurt you? Like, seriously, who hurt you? Was it the Jewish man you were married to in the late 60s, early 70s? I really and sincerely would like to know, because this is just so depressing for this to come from you. It's so depressing.
Yeah.
And it's the same way with J.K. Rowling. It's the same way with her. It's like, girl, people really love Harry Potter, and you're just such a fucking dumpster fire.
Yeah, I mean, J.K. Rowling is, I would say, I mean, J.K. Rowling's is way worse. I think with, at least with Alice Walker, I think there's a way you can still separate the art from the artist and very much enjoy and gain a lot of positivity from The Color Purple. Whereas, like, I would just I would not read Harry Potter to my kids, but I would show them The Color Purple.
Yeah, like Harry Potter, you have characters like Cho Chang, which literally sounds like ding dong ring dong. It doesn't sound like real names of real people. Right. You've got very few characters of color or even like non-British origin. Let's be clear about that, because we have Seamus is like one of the only non-British kids that we discuss. Everyone else is actually British.
I literally saw a tweet today that was like, the fact that he's named Seamus Finnegan and he's Irish is like naming an American person Hamburger Big Mac. Like, it's just insane.
Yeah,
Why
it is like
do this for everyone that's not British and white?
It's such a caricature, and then like making the one gay character out of the universe of people be like, yeah, I thought about being gay, but then I just decided to be abstinent the rest of my life.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, J.K. Rowling, oh, oof. Just big oof. That's my statement on J.K. Rowling. Big oof.
Like, I can't even understand how there would be no trans people in the Harry Potter universe, how there would be no gay people in the Harry Potter universe, because like there's literally a universe of fan fiction out there about these things.
Mhm.
I mean, could you imagine how magical it would be to be a child who grows up not knowing magic? You find out that you're a magical being, and through magic you have the ability to shapeshift, and you just so happen to be trans. Could you imagine what a fantasy that would be?
It is crazy that she writes a book about people shapeshifting into animals, but you know, a trans person existing in real life is just, makes her want to rip her hair out. It's crazy.
It's insane. And the idea that, they're going to go in the bathroom and assault you, and they're going to go into women's shelters and attack you. Like, it's so wild. And it's so.
And it's crazy that that's the line of thought when it's proven time and time again in J.K. Rowling's own life. Heck, even in Color Purple, bring it back. Men don't need to hide to do those things. They don't need to pretend to be women to do those things because they'll just do it.
Yeah. Why
They'll
would a man go through the gender reassignment surgery in order to be or gender confirmation surgery, that's what we're calling it now. Why would a man go through gender confirming surgery in order to rape women?
He can just do it now. He'll be fine.
Yeah.
Trump was just president. Biden's president now. He still got allegations on his hand too. Like,
yeah. I mean, men don't need to go through all that. All they need to do is step out their door and get it in their mind. I plan to attack somebody. Why go through all the rigmarole?
Right.
And so it's stunning to me how and then also just her absolute dismissal of trans men as being, screwed up women who are being brainwashed by the media and who are actually just lesbians. How dismissive, how utterly dismissive.
She literally called trans men her lost lesbian sisters. JK! Oh, man.
Right. And, it's the discussion of Alice Walker's anti-Semitism. The reason why it's so disappointing is because a big part of accepting The Color Purple is accepting intersectionality when it comes to the oppression that people face and the struggles we face in our fights for equality and justice. And when you start telling people, yes, you can be a queer woman, but you're also a Black woman. Yes, you can be a Black person, but you're also a Black woman. When you start discussing intersectionality and then you talk about Jewish people in that way as being just the most evil beings in the world, you're cutting off an area of discussion because Black Jewish people are no longer invited to be a part of the discussion. And there are Black Jewish people.
Right.
So that's the reason why it's so kind of the opposite of affirming, because you're saying it's okay if you want to interact with me and my art, but if you'd like to read it in Hebrew, that's not allowed. And I hate that. I absolutely hate it. Also, like, another thing that's really weird too, which I found out while going through the Wikipedia and everything, is that Alice Walker, she was married to a Jewish man from like 1967 and 1976. They had a daughter together whose name is Rebecca. And Rebecca invented the term third wave feminism when she was 22.
Good for her.
Yeah, she wrote an article and she said, I'm the third wave. And that's where we get third wave from. And yeah, it's just like your family has been a big part of like feminism. And for you to be like, it's all well and good to be a part of this conversation, but if you're Jewish, fuck off. Like, that stings. Also, your daughter's a Black Jewish woman. Your daughter's a Black Jewish woman. This is so fucking backwards and weird. It's so bizarre.
Very odd. Very, very odd.
I can only imagine what Thanksgiving and Christmas are like around there. It's gotta be. It's very much like a messenger dropping off a present with like, and don't call.
Yeah.
But yeah. Also, like Alice Walker used to date Tracy Chapman, which I think is really interesting because Tracy Chapman is super private about her personal life. And so, yeah, that's a side note. And then also her daughter used to date Michelle Ndegeocello, which is also very interesting as well. So like they have a lot of connections with like very prominent Black lesbian musicians. Side note.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So what on this viewing, did you notice anything different or new that because I feel like when you watch movies over and over again, there's always like, oh, I didn't catch that. How did I not notice that?
Okay, so when Nettie first shows up to Celie's house, she's sitting on the back of the mail truck.
Mm-hmm.
So Nettie always arrives to Celie through the mail.
Hey! That's a good one.
Yeah. And as I was watching, there is a Making of the Color Purple biography thing that's on YouTube, which you can watch it. And they were talking about the casting and the set design and all this stuff. Steven Spielberg says that the 8th character in the movie is the mailbox. And so like as the seasons change and things happen, the mailbox is used a lot for transition scenes. And so it is kind of interesting that it would be that Nettie arrives in the mail, and then Steven Spielberg says that the mailbox represents Celie's heart. So all those years where Nettie's letters weren't in the mailbox, it's because Celie's heart was empty. So interesting stuff going on there. So that's something that I hadn't noticed before, but I noticed this time around. Another thing that I noticed this time around that I don't think I had paid as much close attention to, but I did this time, was definitely Squeak. So Squeak is the character that Harpo starts dating after he and Sophia split up. And Squeak, we kind of only really pay attention to in a couple of scenes. That scene in the juke joint where they're fighting, and then the scene at the table where she's like, my name's Mary Agnes and I'm gonna sing. But there is a moment where Squeak is she's standing on the porch with the rest of Sophia's family when Sophia gets to come home for like 2 seconds for Christmas. And the look on Squeak's face is like, I'm so glad you're home. And in the book, Squeak and Sophia kind of have a little bit of an adversarial relationship, but when Sophia goes to jail, Squeak raises her children. Those become her children, essentially. And they develop a bond and a relationship over the fact that, you know, they kind of went from one being the mother to the other being the mother, and that shared motherhood of these children. And Squeak took really good care of the kids in Sophia's absence. But I had never noticed that Squeak was waiting on the porch for Sophia with the rest of Sophia's family. And I thought that was a really nice thing to capture, because it's great that this woman could put aside pettiness about, oh, we share the same love interest, and be like, these are motherless children. And no matter how we have disagreed, I understand that they need a home and I'm going to provide it for them. So I really like that. So those are the 2 things that I noticed this time around that I didn't before. Also, Steven Spielberg's really good about like tying scenes together. The movie starts out in a field and it ends in a field.
Yeah. He's a very bookend filmmaker. I really enjoy how each of his, I mean, Spielberg really is like film school, the man. Like, like as someone who went to film school, it's a lot about Spielberg and how like quite literally every scene is the perfect version of a beginning, middle, end. Each scene, no scene ever feels wasted, because the scene will always end very different than how it started. Something has radically changed usually.
I was also surprised how much of this movie was ad-libbed. Not Spielberg, Oprah said that the scene at the dinner table when Sophia is telling people that, you know, she's confused, and then she talks about how she was feeling really bad in the store when Miss Celie came to help her, that whole portion of that was improvised.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it made me kind of have an added respect for Oprah as an actress, because this is one of those movies that I don't see her as Oprah, I see her as Sophia.
Oh, for sure. I thought I knew she had an Oscar nom for this, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. Oprah, the Oscar nominee for acting, would not expect, but I mean, she really does melt into the role.
Yeah.
So
She's
her and
not.
Shug,
Go ahead.
yeah, so her and Shug got best supporting actress noms.
Well, like Oprah in this movie, she's not the Oprah from the Oprah Winfrey Show talking about you get a car. Like it's
Right.
her voice is different. Everything about her is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are
With,
things that I really like. I'm sad too because one statement that Rae Chong made, Rae Chong, she's the daughter of Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong, and she played Squeak in the movie. And she was like, you know, a thing that really makes the rest of us sad is that because of the criticism we received, number one, for Spielberg making an all Black movie for the most part, and also the depiction of Black men as being violent, that for almost a decade, people didn't want to make large budget movies with all Black casts. Because they didn't want, because they didn't want to risk the chance that, you know, people would turn away at the box office.
Right.
And that's really sad because I would love to see what a future would look like if this had not only been embraced, but if it had won multiple Oscars, how many more of those stories would have been told?
Yeah. The Oscars thing, especially at that time, like really clinched it, unfortunately.
Yeah, and there are a few of these like all one cast movies that stand out in people's minds that get linked with Community. So like in Spielberg's catalog, I don't think a lot of people outside of the Black community really think of The Color Purple, but it is one of those movies that we embrace as like one of our movies. But then there's movies like The Joy Luck Club, who again, it's a movie that has tons of criticism with it for the way it portrays Asian women and kind of like the horrors of the trauma, the generational trauma. But it's also a movie that I imagine that if you were a second or third generation Asian woman, you probably know these stories, and this is you that you're seeing on the screen. And even though there's a lot that's maybe imperfect about it, you're like, this is us. And then for that to get criticized, and then people quit making those movies.
Yeah, I think Crazy Rich Asians was like the first big budget film with an all Asian cast in America since The Joy Luck Club in the early 2000s.
Yeah, and it's sad. It's sad because as a woman, not as an Asian woman, but just as a woman in general, I love The Joy Luck Club. I really do. It's a highly enjoyable.
I enjoyed the book as well.
Yeah, it's not a movie that we'll talk about here just because of the fact there's not really a queer component to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, we'd have a hard time talking about that movie, I think, too.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where, like the minute that there's any kind of controversy, it's like people look at the superficial instead of looking at maybe something a little bit deeper, and it just stops everything.
So that's how I feel about Call Me By Your Name.
By Your Name.
You know, if you bring it up, we will never review this movie on this channel because I honestly can't. It would be me. Sam would not get a word in. It would be me launching onto the longest tangent in the world for like an hour. And Sam would be like, yes, I also watched it.
Oh, then we have to watch it now. Then we have to talk about it. After we do our review of FX, we will be doing a review of Bad Buddy. And then after Bad Buddy, we'll have to do Call Me By Your Name.
Why?
Because I gave you my heart. We're talking about it now. So now we get to talk about your heart.
If you want to. But again, it's like you and Color Purple. Like, have you seen Call Me By Your Name?
No.
You don't have to like it, but I will be like personally like definitely sad if you don't. It's one of those. But Call Me By Your Name is one of those movies where it's like, even other queer people shit on that movie in a way that's like, but why? Because a lot of the criticisms I feel like don't hold up under better scrutiny. And it's really sad that, I'm glad that it got, Academy Award nominations, and there has been an influx of queer representation. So it's not like that killed the conversation or anything, but it was a movie that like other queer people shot down really fast. And it was, I never understood why. Because when I watched it, I was like, I feel like this movie really is speaking to me on a deep level. And there's a lot here that I really resonate with. And to see other queer people just be like, no, fuck you. It's problematic. So we have to cancel it. And it's like, but it's, I mean, isn't that why movies are good sometimes? Is because don't you want, like, I don't want a movie where like, it's hard to, how do you phrase this? But like, sometimes it's okay to deal with problematic things in movies. It's a movie and it happens in life. So why can't we talk about it? Why do we have to be like, oh, no, we can't watch this movie. A problematic thing has happened in it. Like, I don't know. I think that's a weird response to movie criticism nowadays. Like, I remember telling someone, my favorite movie of all time is Sleeping Beauty. Sorry, I'm on a tangent now.
Okay.
It's Sleeping Beauty 1959, the Disney version. And I remember a friend of mine, he was like, oh, you mean the movie where a guy kisses a girl when she's asleep, non-consensually? And I'm like, girl, it's a 1950 Disney movie. Like, it's not.
He saved her life.
It's like, it's not that deep. Like, we don't have to, like, what?
Yeah, and
Like,
it's not like it's the original fairy tale where he literally fucks her awake. Because, like, in the original Grimm story, like, he has sex with her, and she wakes up when she gives birth. No, not even that. She wakes up because her baby is nursing and actually sucks on her finger instead of her nipple.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, and I can't like Sleeping Beauty? Like, how dumb. But yes, sorry. I totally just, like, I went somewhere.
It's okay. No, I get it, though. Like, it's like, people have done the best they can with the work. Like, there was a lot of people who loved the book and were mad that there wasn't more lesbian representation in the movie. There were a lot of people who read the book and were like, why didn't you mention the part about Mr. Cross-dressing back when he and Shug Avery first got together before he met Celie? But,
ooh, interesting.
Yeah, which is why I say generational trauma. Mr. was probably a really nice, sensitive guy, and his fucking daddy ruined him, and he became a fucking monster. But anyway, you can't fit everything in sometimes. Sometimes you got to go with, like, you know, the main points. But also, like, it's a Steven Spielberg movie. You know, that's just not his brand. I don't think that'll ever be his brand. Erotic thriller, you know, just, I don't see it for him. But yeah, I like this movie. I like this story. I'm glad we got a chance to review this. This is definitely, like, it's one of my favorite things ever. And I hope that more people will watch it because it definitely doesn't get mentioned outside of my community that much. Like, just really and truly, if you ever in your life end up dating a Black man and you're like, you know, what do you think of The Color Purple? He probably will have a whole conversation with you about his feelings about it. But if you ask your next white date, have you ever seen The Color Purple? They'll probably say, no, I have not. Because even though it was a multiple Oscar nominated movie, it kind of lives in our community the most.
Right. Well, so the next time, we didn't rank it.
Huh?
You're going to give it a 5. Well, why should we rank it? I think we'll both give it 5s, right?
Yeah, I'm like, what ranking?
You're like 12 out of 10.
Yeah, like, I'm so sorry, but, like, this is the movie. Like, top 10 movies in life, this is easily my top 3. And for my mom, probably her top 2. Like, this movie means that much to our family.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
There's a Sondheim quote. I think it's something like, isn't it great how art can speak for us? And isn't it?
Yes, it's wonderful. So I don't have an Instagram of the day because a lot of the actors that were in this movie are older people and they don't really do Instagram like that. I think Whoopi has an Instagram because of The View, but yeah, they're not really big on Instagram. And I don't know that a manga of the day would really work for today's episode.
I did not bring one.
Yeah.
I did want to say the one thing that was interesting that I forgot to mention about Whoopi earlier is most of Whoopi in pop culture from when I was born and raised, it was like Whoopi on The View. So like I've seen Ghost, but like as far as Whoopi outside of like The View and just general pop culture, like I know she was in the Sister Act. I know she's been in Sister Act. I've never seen Sister Act, but like I know like the very base. I knew that she was in The Color Purple, but this was the first time that I really saw Whoopi in like the true Whoopi form, like at her peak in some ways. Very interesting.
Yes. Like when you watch Whoopi here, you understand why she's an EGOT.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. So
yeah.
our next vlog will be us going over the career discography
of FX, which let me put it out now. We've talked about FX a little bit on this channel before, lightly, maybe. But I will say this, if FX is a group that you just love, maybe don't watch our video because it's the hottest, scorchingest of takes. Sam and I have had some real scathing discussions about FX as a group and some of the members. And we're just gonna tell you what we think. I will say this, the music's good. It's just,
fuck Amber.
We have some complaints. So yeah, expect that to be much like the Madonna review, nothing but the slander at times. So, yeah. You know, that's all we can give you is nothing but the slander sometimes.
That's what we should call those. That's what we should call those episodes. Nothing but the slander. Madonna.
When we start our podcast, that's what we should call it. Nothing but the slander.
I'm telling you. Oh, they were so mad about our Madonna discog. I think you're being ageist. Excuse me? First of all, I'm an old bitch, so I don't know what you're talking about. And secondly, it's not me who's telling Madonna that she has to go get a BBL. That's her telling herself she has to get a BBL. That's her telling herself that she's got to airbrush herself into literally another human face in order to be able to post to social media. So if we're going to talk about ageist here, it's not that I feel like Madonna's too old to do the things she does. It's just that at her big age, why does she fucking care?
Yes, let's talk about Madonna's internalized ageism, shall we?
Right.
Let's turn it around for her.
Yeah, miss me with that bullshit because it's her who's the constantly hollering ageism, but is also doing shit that's wildly out of pocket in order to make sure that 20-some-year-old men find her attractive.
Right.
It's like, at what age will you finally get over the need to be fuckable?
Right. Right. All right. So, so last thing, FX is next. Bad Bunny after that. Apparently, Call Me by Your Name. Oh my God.
Can't wait. Can't wait. It's gonna be the best.
And then it's Sam's pick for music artists that we get to do. So then you can think about it. Are we doing Mariah Carey?
Mariah Carey.
Work.
Now that Christmas is over, it's Mariah.
Well, we had multiple options. I know we were talking about Bruno one day, Mariah. We should do
it's got to be Mariah because, again, we're going through like the gay icon subset of this, and it's got to be Mariah because being a gay male in the 2020s, she's just a touch point to your culture.
Very much so. I'm already awaiting. I already know that I'll have to protect my fragile Arianator heart for the Mariah episode. With the Mariah episode.
I don't know why. Mariah has never slandered Ariana Grande.
I don't know. I feel like people like there's infighting about that within the gays. So
I'm just gonna put it this way. Madonna having hard feelings about Lady Gaga is petty. Mm-hmm. But when you compare Express Yourself to Born This Way, there are similarities. Mm-hmm. Mariah, if she had anything negative to say about Ariana Grande, it would be petty. But you can't act like Ariana's first album wasn't heavily influenced by Mariah's musical style.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So it's not me trying to, it's not us picking on Ariana. It's just saying, obviously the girls were influenced.
Oh, totally. I'm not trying to say Ariana Grande is not perfect, and there is a lot of valid criticism to her as a public figure. She was recently in the like Asian fishing scandal. Like, girl, there's a lot to talk about. But you know what? I'm sorry, I stand.
Well, then after we do Mariah, then we'll do a whole episode on Ariana. That way you can bust out what you feel are her greatest hits.
Well, apparently not, because you already slandered Honeymoon Avenue one time, and I'm still not over it.
I just don't understand how that's on your greatest hits list.
It's good.
I mean, that's fine. I feel like it doesn't have the streams. I feel like it's not something that most people pull out of the catalog. I mean, I will tell you, it's going to have to be your episode, because my favorite Ariana Grande song to this very moment, second, forever is You'll Never Know.
I have listened to that song because you have talked about it, and I could not for the life of me even hum what the tune of that song is. It is so not on my radar.
And when I saw her in concert, I hopped out of my seat and started screaming the lyrics back to her. Like, that is my fucking song. That one and Best Mistake. Yeah, that and Best Mistake are like my two, like, if she could perform any song for me in person, that's what I want to hear.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can't wait.
So, yeah, we'll have some interesting things coming up. Hope everyone has a great start to the new year. I hope you enjoyed and got something wonderful from this talk. Let us know how you feel about Color Purple and how it's affected your life in the comments.
Yep. Rest in peace, Betty White. We loved you, girl.
Girl, Betty White. Yeah, rest in peace, bitch.
Do you still do well, I don't know if you do it, but do you do the ad-libs for the Golden Girls theme song?
The ad-libs? Thank you for being a friend. What?
No, okay. It's like, thank you for being a friend. Oh, yeah. So you started from the bottom, now we're here, girl. Oh, yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I will send that to you. I literally put it in the tweet that I posted about Betty White on Twitter. I feel shamed.
Did you?
I sure did.
I liked the tweet too.
And you didn't watch the video at all. Fuck you. All right, guys. To friendship. See you later.
Sorry. Bye.